Say It Loud Network presents Corner Table Talk.
Norm.
What's happening, Brad?
What's going on, brother?
Man, staying cautious, trying to stay out of everybody's way, stay safe.
Masking up, I hope.
Yeah, masking up, but then still trying to enjoy myself. Being in is okay at this stage in our lives. I don't know if we were 23, how we'd feel, but at this stage, it didn't really change too much.
That's a conversation we need to have with our sons. I know they're taking some chances. So, but hey, man, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. And some people might be wondering, well, what does, this is a restaurant hospitality podcast. What does Norm Nixon have to do with restaurants and hospitality? We're going to get into that for sure. I have a very long history with Norm dating back to the 70s. In college. But for those of you that don't know who my famous guest is here, two-time NBA champion, two-time All-Star, first team, rookie, All-Star, standout, amazing player at Duquesne, just an all-around incredible guy, celebrity, friend of the stars, friend of athletes, Norm Nixon. Thank you for joining Corner Table Talk. Appreciate it.
Hey, Brad, I want to meet that guy you were just talking about. Is he on with us?
You don't know him.
Is he on the phone? Is he on the phone with, man, tell him I said hello. No, it's good, Brad. I mean, like you said, it's a hospitality show, but you always remind me that our first meeting was in the gym when you were a youngster.
Well,
so I didn't
you don't remember me, but I remember you. I watched a lot of that game from the bench, but Norm was amazing in college, and my team, University of Massachusetts, we played against Norm when he was at Duquesne University. So I actually go back to after that, Norm and I reconnected in New York in 1986 when Debbie was performing in Sweet Charity on Broadway, a Bob Fosse production. It was an amazing play. And Norm used to come by and hang out at the restaurant that I had opened at that time called Memphis. We actually, I don't know if you remember, Norm, but we ended up having the closing night party for Sweet Charity at Memphis. You remember that?
Oh, I remember all that. I think I was just talking to a couple of our mutual friends, and I was telling them that I used to walk from there to meet Debbie at the theater with Vivian on my shoulders. She was a baby. And we stop in Memphis and sit at the bar.
That's right. We had that long bar. Yep. You guys would
She get her Shirley Temple. And I was standing on 72nd Street. I was talking about the old building. Ed Bradley was my neighbor, so he used to come into Memphis. So Memphis was my kind of go-to spot.
Yeah, well, it was great to have you. And you guys, when you started coming around, we had just opened Memphis, and the association with you and Debbie led to catering gigs for Eddie Murphy at Eddie's house, Bubble Hill in Inglewood Cliffs. And then at the Cosby Show, we started doing catering gigs for them. So you guys were really, really good to me, from going back that far. So I'm going to start off with what I call short order questions. Short order is kind of restaurant terminology for fast food. But I'm going to hit you with a couple of questions, Norm, get you a quick response, and we're going to roll. So first question, favorite meal?
Oh, man, my favorite meal. If you want to just get me to something in the house, man, give me some cabbage and some hot cornbread. If you want to take just some cabbage, Debbie, my mom, my grandmom, if you want to take me back to one of those, it's actually that kind of a meal, man.
I love that.
Hot water cornbread with some greens and some cut tomatoes, man. It's a healthy, and it's like, I love that.
Oh, man.
Now, I got tons of dishes, but I love that one.
Well, that's a good one. All right. So how about most romantic place you and Debbie have ever dined?
I think for us, you got to go back to like Positano. Mm-hmm. That Amalfi Coast is just so beautiful, man. It's so beautiful sitting there. It's a different place. And, those kind of dinners there, when you first do it, you don't know anybody. So you're really just yourselves together, enjoying the atmosphere, the scene. It's built in the side of the hill, the Mediterranean, man. It's just so beautiful there. So I would have to say that is my favorite.
I love that, man. And I'm going to come back to Italy because I know that's been a special place for you. Next question. Do you eat before or after your morning workout?
After.
Norm is a religious workout guy. We used to run around the track at UCLA together every morning. You have a team of cats out there from James Ingram to be a bunch of us, right, Norm?
Yeah, man. They're putting it down, man. Bringing the sun up in the morning.
Every day.
Bringing the sun up.
Yep. All right. So next question, past or present person you would most like to have a drink with?
Past or present?
Yep. Someone who's either still with us or gone.
Well, Brad, it becomes I'm almost ready to cry now, man. It'll be my mom. Come on, man. We were mama's boys.
Yeah, man.
To have her right here, sit here, in my backyard, we have grandbabies now, eating with me, sitting out with them, having opportunities. So, that trumps everything. Yeah. Everything. I mean, you going to be like me. You going to start crying.
Stop, man. Stop.
I'm tearing up. Hey, look, I'm telling you, man, when you asked me, I thought about it. I mean, tears started coming to my eyes, man.
Yeah, man. You came to my, the little brunch that I had for 20 of us that honored my mom, man. And, to your point, I don't know if we're ever the same after we lose our moms, man.
I'll share this with you. One of my friends told me this. He had lost his mother. Actually, one of my friends from Macon, Georgia, was my college roommate. His mom died when we was really young. And people used to say, oh, man, I know how you feel. He used to come back in the room and say, man, they can all say that, man. You don't know how you feel till you lose your mom. I get tired of hearing people say that. And so for you and I, when you have it, you like you say, you're never the same. It changes. In particular, like I said, I was a mama's boy like you. I know you weren't a mama. I experienced you and your mom, and I was a mama's boy as well. So there is nothing trumps that one. But we better move on, man, before we start crying.
Yeah, man, I know.
We're supposed to be athletes, macho. Man, did you hear Brad's first show? They're up in there crying.
Norm and Brad crying all on the internet. All right. So here we go. Now I know it's not possible to embarrass you, but I'm still going to ask you this. So last year, in front of, probably 1,000 or so people at the Annenberg in Beverly Hills, and a big gala for the Debbie Allen Dance Academy, Norm in front of friends, family, associates, investors, philanthropists, got up on stage and sang in key, Golden Lady.
That's a key word, pardon the pun, but go ahead.
Golden Lady, Stevie Wonder's Golden Lady. So my question is, Norm, what's the follow-up song? What's next?
Oh, man. Hey, Brad, all right. So I just, you have to bear with me for a moment. After that, I went and did it at the Apollo.
What?
I went and sang at the Apollo for the big, a big dinner. I went and sang a couple of songs, right? So, My Romance. So people keep asking me to do it again. I said, I retired. I played the Annenberg, then I played the Apollo. I don't perform no more. So I technically have always been a closet guy like playing around with James, even from Georgia days. I used to get in and play the piano sometimes with those guys. And, I promised James, and James is another good friend. I said, James, one day I'll step out of the living room and go do something and have some fun. To be able to do it, I didn't take myself serious, but it's not as bad as shooting a free throw in a world championship game. I said, hey, if I mess up, I mess up. But if I can stay in key, because my bar was so low, all you guys thought I was James Ingram because I didn't crack. But my bar was so low, I was brilliant.
See, not many people have the comparison to make to a free throw in a championship game in terms of nerves and comparing it to that moment. Only you, brother. But, our friend John McClain gets mad when you call yourself a singer because he already knows how talented you are. And that's just, now you're crossing over into music and that's his domain.
Oh, he talks all the time. He said, I can't believe it.
So, Norm, I want to switch up a little bit here. Thank you for those quick answers. So I want to go back to your hometown of Macon, Georgia. And just kind of get a little sense from you of some of your really earliest food memories growing up. What was food like around the Nixon household? Maybe when did the family ever go out to eat? What was your first experience dining out? But give me a little Macon flavor from the Nixon perspective.
Well, from my perspective, I grew up, like you said, in Macon, Georgia. And at that time, it was still pretty much segregated. I didn't go to school with a white person until I was in the 10th grade. went to all black schools. But I think when you're growing up in that, you don't really think about it because I was with all my friends. You know, we didn't venture far outside the neighborhoods. My mother dealt with it. I remember her going in back doors. So the food at that time, going out wasn't really a choice. You might have one spot you might go to every now and then, but the food was cooked in your homes. Like I grew up with my grandmother, my mother, my great aunts in the country, you know, my grandmother's siblings, because I grew up more with my mother's side of the family. So, you know, those women go in the kitchen, man, and it was on. So from fried chicken, pork chops, greens, macaroni, cheese, fresh baked cakes, fresh cornbread. They made the wine.
Now, was that happening regularly, or was it
that happened Sunday, probably until I got up? Well, probably until I was maybe 13, 14, because we always went out to the country to visit my aunts, and they always cooked after church. You always had a big meeting. So those are my younger years. When I got old enough to start going to junior high and high school, it was just more in the home. My grandmother cooked, my aunts cooked. They still always cooked at the church for people, you know. You know, they always fed people, go up there, breakfast. So my favorite meals started becoming like fresh salmon cake with biscuits. My mother used to make that, like salmon cakes with biscuits and syrup. Till the day she died, when I hit the Atlanta airport, because it was 1 hour from the airport. I called my mom. I'm in the car. I'm on my way home. When I walked in the door, those salmon cakes and biscuits, that's all I wanted. I ate about 6 biscuits, 5 or 6 salmon cakes.
Well, mom knew how to do that, huh?
Oh, man. Come on, man. Come on. So my memories were more the meals cooked inside of the home. I mean, I think when I went away to college and got into the NBA, started traveling everywhere, eating different kinds of food. And so that developed more from college forward.
Okay. So, yeah, I wanted to touch on next your experience at Duquesne. I know Pittsburgh has a very rich African-American community. I know, you know, our friend Denzel is now in charge of the August Wilson, all of his plays. Do you have food memories, Norm, of Pittsburgh at all, and Duquesne? Were there restaurants that were popular? Anything black owned that you recall?
Come on, Brad. You know we didn't go to restaurants. I went to. I will tell you this. I started experiencing like Italian food. There was a large Italian population there, so I went to some great Italian restaurants with some of the Italians that lived there. I played with a lot of Polish guys, so you know, you started eating Polish food, that Polish sausage, those meals. So I went to some of those restaurants, actually in their homes, some of the restaurants, Italian people in their homes, because a lot of those guys was first generation here. So you're talking dandelions, salads out of the yard, fresh this. So Polish restaurants, Italian restaurants, and then starting to, and there were a couple of southern restaurants on the hill, but I had an aunt that lived there. You know, my father's older sister lived in Pittsburgh. So again, she had a garden with greens, cabbage, tomatoes. So when I really got ready to eat, I went to her house and she put it down. I used to take my teams there, man. We'd be sleep on the floor, you know, after we eat all that food, and she could cook. So I came from a family of and my father can cook. So I came from a family of people that could really cook, like my mom, my father, all of them could cook. So they cooked.
It must be interesting to you, having grown up around farming and seeing fresh ingredients, you know, on the table is just kind of a regular occurrence, to see a restaurant trend become farm to table as if, you know, that was something new. But you grew up that way.
Yeah, you grew up with that. You know, they picked the greens out of the yard, the cabbages out of the yard, the tomatoes, and boom. And, you know, as we got older, you started buying stuff from farmers market, because they always have a farmers market. But, you know, we could get in the car. We could just drive to our relative's house, you know. But when that generation got, like I think my mother's generation, after that generation, they farmed less and less. Like my mother's generation, her first cousins and all of them, they still had those farms, man. You could go out there, you could go get fresh food, or they had gardens. When they moved into town, they had big gardens, you know, grew everything, peppers and the tomatoes and the greens and the palm trees. And so it was all of that kind of stuff around you. Then everything urbanized a lot. Family farms were gone. So it changed. I mean, even Macon's different now when I go back. It's a different place.
How so, Norm?
Well, it's a different place because It's more of a city. All the problems you have in major cities, you have on a different scale, like gangs. You have those things. The homicide rates kind of in the communities I grew up in is different. So the same problems that plague major cities plague that place as well. When I left there, it was a little different. We had high school. We all went to high school. Everybody tried to graduate from high school. The graduation rate dropped, this dropped. Socially, I guess, it hasn't progressed a whole lot.
What's interesting, obviously prominent people like yourself, having moved away from Macon, but there's something happening now, a trend happening now, reverse migration, where a lot of prominent African Americans, I know the New York Times columnist Charles Blow just wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago in the New York Times where he's leaving New York City to move back to Georgia. And just how that's become a trend where, a lot of folks that had moved to northern cities are looking to kind of reestablish their roots in the South and for various reasons. So I wonder what impact that might have on some of the conditions that you just mentioned.
Well, what I'll say that happened in most of the major cities because I at one time, Brad, 85% of African Americans lived in the southeastern part of the United States. And then everybody migrated. Migrated to different places, New York, to Detroit, to Chicago, to New Orleans, would move to California. So there's a lot of history about the Black migration. What I'm finding is a lot of people went to the big cities because a lot of my friends who went to college and graduated never went back. And I don't think they ever go back to Macon. They'll go back to Atlanta. They go into Birmingham. They go into Charlotte. They go into all these cities because they have first of all, a cost of living. I mean, you can go spend a third of what you spend here and have a beautiful home in a beautiful area. So the quality of life back there is a lot different in major cities, not as much of the hustle and bustle. So you got to give and take in that situation. You might not have as much theater as New York, but you're going to have a nice house, nice schools, nice playgrounds, nice place to go. So a lot of people are going back. In the smaller towns, they don't go back to the smaller towns. Like they don't go back to Macon because of the job market. Now you can go get a beautiful home, but you go to Charlotte, Atlanta, you're going to have, I'm not trying to say those places are country, but culturally there's just more to do. You're going to have museums, you're going to have theaters, you're going to have all these things that provide in those big cities. So people have a tendency to go to the cities, and a lot of people are going back. That's the short answer.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see, the impact on those places as that trend unfolds. So Norm, I want to jump, take a big step forward. You're 22 years old, first round draft pick. LA Lakers, Los Angeles, from Pittsburgh to LA, you hit the ground, you're playing in the Forum, you're starring on what becomes the Showtime Lakers. Tell me a little bit, man, about what that felt like as a 22-year-old to land in LA with your set of experiences and your eyes wide open. What was that experience like? What did that feel like?
Well, I'll laugh about this. I was 21, Brad. I was one of those young guys. I turned 20. I'll just mess with you. In hindsight, when I talk about my experience at Duquesne got me ready for the NBA. My experience there got me ready for the NBA. As you say, I went to a small college and, I knew I could play. So I always had a chip on my shoulder as far as playing. So I wasn't even thinking about LA. I was coming out here to take a starting job. It's just like when I went to Duquesne, if I came and played against you guys in New York, they talk about a New York guard before they talked about me. So I always had a chip on my shoulder. I always thought I was just as good as everybody else playing. So when I got here, coming from a small school and being like a third round pick, my whole focus was coming out here to get me a starting job. And in sports, and I'll tell you, most guys that say this, and I'm saying it's not a cocky thing. It's like, it's the natural progression in what we're trying to do. You go to college. And you go to college and say, man, I'm going to start. And if you come into pros, I don't care where it's, man, I'm going to take me a job. I'm going to get me a job. I'm going to start. I don't care. They drafted a guard ahead of me in my same position. I didn't even think about him. I wasn't worried about him because I was thinking beyond that. Mm-hmm. So from a sports perspective, that's what it was. Now, from an awe-inspiring, when I walked in, it's like, man, I'm playing with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I looked over there. So that part, the basketball, I was like, I'm going to handle this. But on the other part, it's like, oh, man, I left Pittsburgh, man. I landed out here. Everything was green and flowers. And it was November.
Where did you first live, Norm? in LA?
We all lived in Fox Hills. Fox Hills at that time was probably one of the most beautiful apartment complexes in the country. It was stuff you had never seen before. You know, you walked out, they had swimming pool, they had the tennis courts. You know, so all of us stayed around kind of in that area. We could get apartments, you know, mold around it. You didn't see that kind of a complex anywhere. And it's still beautiful today. But at that time, it was brand new. So we all kind of lived over there. We started buying houses in that area when you start stepping up, buying houses and doing what you do. We're always in that area. But the other thing that was amazing, too, is, you know, you walk into the forum, man, and just the people that sat around the floor, you know, you're like, oh, man, Jack Nicholson's over here, this guy, because, oh, man, I watched that movie. So you got to get over that at first because all this stuff you grew up watching, all those guys are sitting at the forum, the ladies, you're like, oh man. And then we turned out to be what we turned out to be basketball wise. So it made for a great marriage and a whole lot of, you know, mutual benefits, you know, mutual interest, education. So it all kind of came together.
One of the things, man, I've always admired about you is just how easily you move around socially from various circles. And, you know, at a Nixon Allen party at your house, there could be any number of famous people, non-famous people, but Norm, you just always moved really effortlessly. And, you know, I know for myself, I learned a lot of my social skills from my dad, from observing my dad in the restaurant. But, you know, I'm curious, man, where did you, you know, in moving around, you know, through restaurants and the places that you hung out and when you first got to LA, how did you get, I know how you had I understand how you got your confidence on the court, but where did that confidence come for you off the court?
I think there were a couple of maybe transformative things that just happened in my life. I mein, when I got with the Lakers, I had gotten out of college, and then you get out of college and you realize how much you don't know. So I just went on a history thing. I read a lot of stuff about African American history. I started reading everybody's autobiographies. I started reading everything about, you know, first LeRon Bennett's book, The History of African American. Then after I did that, I said, let me just read about, you know, American history. So I started reading everybody's autobiographies. You know, I read Miss Shabazz's father's book, which was really eye-opening because here was a guy that wasn't formally educated, but could debate with Harvard professors or anybody in the world. And it was only because he read, and then his experiences that came with that. So another thing that inspired me, so I read Martin Luther King's book, Frederick Douglass' book, Harriet Tubman's book, History of the United States, the history of this, the history of the South. And then playing with guys like Kareem Jamal, guys that read a lot. Our Laker team was a team that really read a lot. So guys were giving me books. Jim Jones gave me As a Man Thinketh when I was like 22 years old. I read those books. So just from that perspective, you started learning that. You know, Debbie and I have been married a long time. So here is entertainment coming from a classic background with me, you know, sports background, but a guy that was with the Kareems and the Lou Adlers and Jack Nicholsons, who on their other side collected art, who read, who did stuff. That thing. And so Debbie and I, because we were entertainment and sports, so when we had dinners, we always had you could, like you say, you come to my house, you know, Kareem want to know about restaurants. You want to talk to Kareem. You don't know John McClain. He's in the music business, but quietly done an amazing thing. He was my crazy friend, James Dean. They love to get at the piano and sing. They can play anything. So we always had little small parties, dinner parties, where we mixed different groups of people. And in those environments, man, you know, you just learn so much about everything. I mean, look at the history in that room. You know, even talking to your dad, you know, I used to go to the Cellar, you know, having a club in New York in the 60s, 70s, you know, there's a certain mentality, certain street knowledge, certain things, you know, there's a certain wisdom. So I've never been afraid to learn. And I came from the projects and segregation. So it doesn't scare me to go be around 1,000 black people with rollers and rags on, because those are my cousins and my uncles and all my people. So I'm comfortable in that environment. You know, I'm not going to do nothing stupid, but I'm comfortable. And then because of what I did sports wise and being with Debbie's and, you know, the Academy Award parties at Georgia, you'll talk about all of that. But you know, with the people that come to those parties, you know, those are things I did. So I'm comfortable with them, but I'm also comfortable in those environments. So as a result of just those experiences and being willing to always learn, you know, I'm always ready to learn. I love traveling. And, you know, Debbie's mother said, you know, read about a place before you go there. So at a young age, whenever I traveled somewhere, I would read books about the place. So when I landed, I knew a little bit about the history, the culture, the religions. So it made a place more interesting to me. So when you can go into a place and you got 20 tourist places you want to see, then, you hang out at the restaurants, you do that, but you go to the museums, you go to history, you go to this neighborhood. I went to Spain. I went in there with the gypsies, but I took a little money, had a little wine with them because I wanted to see them flamenco. So I gave the little girls money. So I sat in there with the gypsies. And the Spanish dudes was like this. I'm in there with those gypsies drinking wine, man, and the girls doing flamenco for me. Because I walked in there with respect for their spot. I didn't go in there with like, oh, this dirty place. Hey, man, I want to see somebody do some flamenco. Give me some wine. Here, give it this money. Let it. Before I knew it, they took the drums out, man. They started singing. Those little girls jumped out there. So it was amazing. So I've always been, and I think that's a part of my personality that I've always just kind of like kept into myself, but it's a reason I can kind of move between different groups of people. Long answer for it, but
no, man,
to get some content.
I think, for anybody listening that, is curious as to how someone like a Norm Nixon becomes someone who's comfortable in the world and comfortable in his skin, that didn't just happen by accident. And I learned a lot by being around you and knowing some of the things that you've exposed yourself to. One of the things that I wanted to touch on too, and you kind of just brought it up. I remember back in the 80s when you were playing that, you would make a point of coming by the Cellar. That the Cellar was my dad's restaurant on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And, our clientele was almost exclusively Black and during the 15 years that he owned it. And so Norm would occasionally show up there and we'd have a nice little time together. But then he also would hang out at a place that I was shocked he would know about called Perks up in Harlem. And I was like,
I knew Perks.
Norm Nixon know about Perks, a little coffee shop, little restaurant that only locals knew about. But, back then, Norm, to your point earlier, there was no internet, man. So, you had to have found a way to know where to go when you hit various places, various cities and towns. How did you guys find your way around to the various restaurants, Black-owned spots, and all of those things in the cities that you traveled to?
Well, in a lot of cases, you're going to always know someone. You're going to have a family member there, a friend there, or a guy that you're playing with that was from there. Say, hey, man, let me take you down to this spot. With our Laker team, whenever we went to Atlanta, my mother would cook. We went to Michigan's, Magic's mom would bring food down to the hotel. So you experience stuff, but through the guys you're playing with, then you meet people and you'll go check out because you want to go get some good food. Sometimes you want to with some different foods. Like, man, I want Southern food, or Brad, I want to go get my hair cut. I don't want to go to a place. So you got different kind of hair. So I can't go to no place where they want to wash my hair and get some scissors. Man, I got to go to one of those places that have that candy stripe outside. So whenever I got to a city, I found one of those because they know how to cut my hair. I don't have to say nothing. Man, give me a shot right here. Boom, boom. And usually that connects you to everything in the city, the barbershop. I told people the barbershop was our country club, man. You go hear about everything. Hey, man, I need to get this out, man. Just go around the corner, man. You got something wrong with my car, man. Go down here, man. Man, I need this. So, for us, that was such a big part of our culture, Brad. Mm-hmm. Such a big. Now, and I'll remind you this. You remember when we did the thing called Black Barbershop, where we went around to the Black barbershops and we had all the cats get tested for hypertension, and all that. And, we did it all around the country because the barbershop is where everybody goes.
So, Norm, when you first started playing with the Lakers in LA, that was in 77, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So give me a little taste of some of the spots that were happening back then. Was the John T's candy store, Carlos and Charlie's, the Forum, some of those spots?
Yeah, we went to Carlos and Charlie's. We went to the candy store, down in the neighborhood to go hear music. I always went to Total Experience and all those places. Like I used to go down there and hear the Dale Fun. So, I still had all that in me, man. I want to go hear the Dale. I went on New Year's Day with Debbie. I said, come on, let's go. I'm taking you somewhere. We went down and listened to the Dale Phonics, man. So those were the Black places. But I also, like you say, I knew a couple of guys. So I had access to the Daisy. That's the place. There was a little place on Rodeo. And there was another private place I used to go to because I was good friends with Sam Nasty, like you said, the guy that owned the team. He took me to a couple of places. And
I know that someone that, ended up becoming a business partner, actually, and went in business with us in Georgia, Lou Adler. Lou is a famous, just an iconic LA guy, produced the Beatles, Mamas and the Papas, owns the Rainbow Whiskey, Roxy on Sunset, just kind of just an iconic LA figure. Norm and you guys became friends. How did that relationship happen, Norman? What impact, if any, did Lou have on the way you kind of moved around town and thought about your endeavors, your business endeavors?
Well, a big impact. I told him one time, probably 3 years ago, somebody kind of asked me a question like, who was the guy that kind of influenced you a lot when you was out there? And when I was thinking about it, who was it business-wise? And it was Lou. So I called him. I said, now, Lou, don't get all emotional on me and cry, man. I said, somebody asked me, and when I thought about it, it was him. Now, I met Lou because I used to do basketball camps all in the summer times all the time. And during those killings in Atlanta, because I'm being from Georgia, I said, I'm going to raise money. I'm going to bring a lot of kids from Atlanta and from my home city of Macon to my basketball camp. So I was raising money to do that because all the murders and this stuff was happening. And one guy wrote a check for it. And I'm like, man, who just paid for these kids? I was bringing like 40 kids. I was like, man, who just paid for all these airfares and hotels? And so they told me a guy's name, and I thought it was another person. Then it ended up being Lou because he never talked about it. It was Lou who paid for it. And so he always sat on the court next to Jack. And I started kind of, I went and I said, damn, Lou, I was like, man, thank you, blah, 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 blah. We talked a little bit. Then I really started paying attention to who he was. How we are, Brad. You watch him dress. He was clean all the time. I was like, okay.
Always had some fly socks on.
Socks and shoes and little hats. I'm like, oh, this guy is cool. Then, I went to his crib. I'm like, so I'll back up one of the funniest things that happened to me with Lou. So, I go out to the house by the beach, one of the most beautiful houses I've ever seen with art all over it, art everywhere. Through him, I met Jack, art everywhere. But I was sitting out by his swimming pool and we were talking, man. And he turned something on and then the music started coming out of the rocks. I grew up in an area where you have a stereo system sitting over there and then the cord go across the floor. You got to put some carpet so people don't trip and stuff like that. So I was sitting out there and the music was coming out of the rocks, man. This could have been 79, 8. I'm like, man, Lou, how did you do that? He was like, no, you just have to have somebody come in and wire your house like they did the phones. Because if you remember my first house, Brad, I used to have music all out in the bag by the pool and stuff. He said, you wired it, you just put the system in one spot. Because I had stereo sitting over here, speak over there. I said, oh, okay. So that was a funny thing. But that was one of the first things. Then, he took me to my first fight in Vegas. I went ringside, sat with him and Jack to a fight. He was like, no, come on, go to the fight. Blah, 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 blah. Meet me here. And I'm not getting too into details, but meet me here. We'll go. And I was like, okay, I went. I sat ringside. Jack gave me his seat. With Jack, they just put a chair up there. I'm at the apron of fights. But just watching him handle business, because you look up, Marvin Gaye was recorded at the Roxy. That Marvin Gaye live album, just live from the Roxy, Mamas and the Papas, Rocky Horror Show. Those Cheech and Chong movies, those Up in Smoke movies, produce all of those things, wrote the song with Sam Cooke, Don't Know Much About History, was a co-write on that song, Roommates, and it's so it just was a smart breed and quiet about it. But the same thing, well-read, art, handle business, boom, down the list, you check off all that. And it just, like you say, been a cool friend of mine forever. I still go walk with him now,
I can totally see that influence. I know when we were planning Georgia, you took me over to his house and just the crystal lamps and the art and just his presence, his vibe was just unlike anybody I had ever been around. I can certainly see his influence.
And I'll say this to Mrs. Shabazz. I know she's listening, and I asked him one time, I said, Lou, I was saying, because, Lou lived around a long time. So he was around everybody. Lou moved through a lot of different circles as well. I say, what was Malcolm's biggest effect on black people from your perspective? So, he said, Norm, I was in the studio with all these guys. And she said, when he came out and when he was talking, instead of those guys being slumped over, they started standing up, putting their chests out. I said, really? He said, yeah, that was what I saw. I was okay. That's interesting. That's interesting coming from somebody who lived the era. That was white. That was Jewish. that was in the studios that was doing stuff. And that was his thing. He said he could see that he was good because those guys started standing up, speaking up for themselves a little bit. So he was the conscience and the voice of a lot of those guys that had been beaten for a long time. So the impact was that. And so I found that to be very interesting.
That is really interesting, man. And,
yeah.
You mentioned, Malcolm, I'm rereading the autobiography for which Ambassador Shabazz wrote the foreword in the new edition. And it's an incredible foreword. I want to segue here, Norm, because you and I have, and again, this is a restaurant hospitality podcast.
Oh,
I wanted to
okay.
really kind of remember, I wanted to lay something because your life is just so fascinating, man. And, the communities that you and Debbie brought together from the sports world and the entertainment world, and the fact that you made it inclusive, to guys like me who, pull out chairs for a living, is, just really, really unique. And so we got together again in New York and kind of got reacquainted. And I'd always fantasized about just the warm weather of California. And you said, hey, man, if you ever get serious, let me know, come out to LA, man, we'll do something together. And, my dad had a name for that. When people make you promises in the restaurant at night, he would call that night talk. It just never really amounted to anything, but it sounded good at night. But lo and behold, I decided to move to LA in '89 and just was ready for some warm weather and a change of scenery. And I reached out to Norm and some people and I had been looking around at some spaces, and we had found a space that was a former Japanese restaurant on Sunset Boulevard called the Imperial Gardens. And it was a really cool building, a 3-story building, just kind of dilapidated and run down, but really had a lot of potential right next to the iconic Marlboro Man sign. And so I went to Norm and I told him, man, we have this building and, what do you think? And Norm came in and took a look at it, and true to his word, Norm stepped in and did not get a lot of fanfare about this at all. And Roxbury is what came of it, but it and became a tremendously successful club. But Norm, you raised damn near every dollar that we needed for Roxbury from the sources that you had accumulated of friends and people in different businesses around town. So I wanted to touch on that because it's relevant to me today as I see people like LeBron and Jay-Z kind of, establishing the fact that they'll go into business with their friends and bring in the people that they grew up with from their neighborhoods into business with them. But you were way ahead of any of that before it was trendy. And I'm really curious as to what instilled that in you. What would cause someone like you with the access that you had to stuff to go into business with someone like me who was not famous, not a celebrity, a new guy in town, a brother just looking to try to get something off the ground?
Well, Brad, like I tell you, one of the things I said when I first got into the NBA, when I had time, you go back and you read and you study. I mean, I was talking to Denzel today. And the thing we talked about is one of his favorite quotes: you have to look behind to go forward. So in looking behind just really mean educating yourself, understanding who you are, understanding the trials and tribulations of all of us. What can you do kind of to help move, balancing this stuff out? And the best way is they're all cliches, each one take one. It's cliches, but it's really true. So when you do that when you go back, I think it's almost natural to do that part, because you want to make sure you help some cats get up and do things. I wanted a restaurant. It was going to be fun to do. And that's the reason in itself. But then I would tell you something funny about the concept. When we all talked, I tried to figure out the concept. You remember I told you about Lou Nail, who owns Nail in New York, was in the Rocky Horror Show. So I used to go to Nail's. And if you remember correctly, when you walked into Nail's, the right side was a jazz bar. The other side was a restaurant, and the club was downstairs. So when we talked about concept, remember we settled on walking into Roxbury. Blues was on the one side, restaurant on the second floor, club on the third floor. I thought that was the coldest concept. So
No, you're right. And I remember that day, man, because you and I walked that space and we hadn't really established yet what was going to go where.
Yeah.
And you referenced Nell's, which was one of my go-to spots in New York. And it made perfect sense. You said dance club, 3rd floor, restaurant, 2nd floor. We do the live music spot on the 1st floor.
Private room that you could get to in the front, where guys could walk in, so the concept, but that came from that, Brad, again, growing up in the South and growing up really being segregated. So I think when you come down there, you're a little more sensitive to certain things, your radar is up. No, let me help these cats. I mean, not saying you don't do business with everybody, but if you have an opportunity where you can, and in my position, it wasn't even about educating nobody and stuff, but where you can help somebody. And at this stage in life, like if you can help educate some guys about how to move through, how to handle your business, how to do stuff, you should be willing to do it. And I mean, you've turned a lot of young chefs on, and like the young guy that has your restaurant now. So you have to do those things. And so it came from that, Brad. And I knew guys wanted a place to hang out because in those days, you can say you can spend your money anywhere, but you want to spend your money where you get service. So I know a lot of guys that didn't get service in certain places. Like, no, let's make sure we have a spot where these guys can get service, because now the African American community has money just like everybody else. So if people can go to a place and they can get service regardless, you're a step ahead of the game.
Yeah, and traditionally, Norm, raising money for restaurants and clubs through institutions is just not, you can't even sit at a banker's desk and ask for a loan for that. But, in a kind of by default way, we established a real marketing precedence too, because the people that you handpicked that became investors in Roxbury and then ultimately Georgia. Georgia was a restaurant that Norm and I opened in '93 following Roxbury on Melrose Avenue, when Melrose was really fashionable and right across from Spike's joint. We decided we wanted a Southern restaurant, an upscale Southern restaurant for, basically what Norm had just said, an extension of a place for our friends. But Norm, it was really going back to Roxbury and then to Georgia. It was the hand-picked people that you highlighted in different industries. Michael Littman, for instance, out of the music business. The first party that we had at Roxbury was a party for Bernie Taupin that Elton John came to, and all of Hollywood showed up. And that basically set us up with Roxbury.
Well, and Total Recall. The thing about those guys, Michael managed George Michael's too, So again, by being in the music, it was like you pick a group of people that have to entertain business-wise, and you service them, because they could bring parties. Some of the other guys, Brad, I used to syndicate real estate. Some guys had made some money with me in different deals, so they were comfortable coming into business with me.
Yeah, you definitely, people trusted you, man. No question about it. And you have a certain financial awareness that I think, as I've spent some time, in business, I've come to really appreciate that. I married a CPA, and I wish that I had the level of financial discipline that she's brought to my life, but different story. So Roxbury at the time, Norm, if you remember back in we opened in '89, early '90s. It was an interesting time for Black Hollywood. And I would venture to say with, Arsenio on the air, Debbie had A Different World on the air, Will had Fresh Prince, Spike was gearing up to do Malcolm. I remember Dee coming in with an X-Cap hat on and girls walking up to him. What does that mean? And he wasn't even, he was famous then, but obviously he's become even more famous since then. At that time, there was an emergence of energy around Black Hollywood. And I thought Roxbury was, for its time, probably the most integrated room in LA. Would you agree with that? And how do you remember the emergence of Black Hollywood during that period?
You're probably right, Brad. It probably was one of the most diverse groups. And again, diverse as far as like industry, racially, socially. So it was that spot. And I think it had a lot to do with, like you say, all the investors that came aboard. And then a lot of the things we did pre-opening. We had probably, like you say, Bernie's party. We had a Total Recall party. We had another party from one of the movies. So when we opened, we had to keep doubling the staff. Black Hollywood was emerging at that time, but those guys didn't have a place where they could be serviced. so they needed a spot. You know, you laugh to it. I always say Las Vegas was the best place in the world. It's like playing to people's egos, man. So if you give a cat a spot, he can come to the door and do this, and he can walk in and get a table in the private room. Come on, man. That was like a deal changing, life changing, perception changing. And those guys deserved it. And I said they didn't deserve it, you know. They needed to have a spot where they got treated right too. So we created that for everybody. That's why the crowd was diverse. So all the major stars, actors always came to the place. That's in fact what we did. And it wasn't always them. It was people you familiar with. Clubs just had a way, you know, you'll get to Georgia, but you know, sometimes we used to go tell our friends, come on, man, you can't come sit at the table for 4 hours and buy a drink. You got to go.
So on Georgia, Norm, we opened up Georgia, you know, on the heels of Rodney King, and the 90s were a very, you know, tumultuous time in LA, from the Rodney King thing to the 94 earthquake to the OJ trial. And then subsequently we had, you know, Johnny had called and wanted to have the victory party for the defense team after the verdict was announced at Georgia, which we ended up having because they had been customers of ours the entire time. You know, what do you remember most? What would you say, you know, stands out for you in terms of Georgia and the fondest memories that you have of that experience?
Well, I will continue to laugh about that one because we was there that they called. It was like, quit it. He called us. We on our way. Let me start getting bomb threats. I was talking about that about a week or two ago. Mm-hmm. But if I think about the memories, Brad, it's just, again, you can always laugh about the diversity. You could probably speak to this better than me, the different groups that came in. And I think one of the creators of a Dynasty or something, she used to come in Wednesday nights. It was older Jewish lady. She'd come in with about 10 of her girlfriends because we were close to a temple. They used to walk in there. They had dinner every week. And you remember Jeffrey Katzenberg? Those guys had their night there. And, you know, so everybody came through that place. So I think that was one of the things I always think about. Like you say, it was really unique in that sense. And then we probably had some of the best parties. I mean, we had parties when Giselle was nominated. I think Bob Johnson had a party there when they was nominated. So again, it was kind of the go-to place in particular for the African-American community when there was like a big thing, and we got great coverage. We were voted the best Oscar party 2 or 3 times.
That's right.
And
that's right.
A lot of that had to do with that.
We got Esquire, best restaurant, Bon Appetit, best restaurant. So.
Yeah, you know, and Debbie was choreographing the Academy Awards, and so all her dancers came, which means all the guys followed all the dancers to our party. They went to have their dinner right after the Academy Awards, and they came to Georgia.
Yeah.
So we had great parties. So that stood out, Brad.
Yeah. And as I start to wind down here, Norm, you know, the restaurant industry, man, has been in free fall this past year with the pandemic and all of that. Do you miss going out? Do you miss being able to rub elbows with people in public?
We laughed at the beginning of the show. It didn't change my life that much, but one of the things I did enjoy doing was going to have dinner and going to different restaurants to eat. I did do that. You know, we don't clubs no more, nothing like that, but being able to go, and a lot of times to go sit at the bar in restaurants and have dinner and have a drink or something and leave. So I do miss that.
Do you think restaurants are going to make a full comeback, Norm? Do you think people are going to be apprehensive about being in crowded rooms?
The whole world is on reset, Brad. The way we do business, you know, doing business at home versus going to offices, some companies going to like not having all that overhead. So everything's going to change. So I think restaurants have changed. I think it's going to take a year and a half, 2 years before it gets back to normal. Everybody will be vaccinated. Hopefully this thing will be gone. So then I think it'll get better. But what this reset has done, you know, only the strongest are going to survive through this period of time because there's so many restaurants that have closed. You know, there are a couple that are staying open that are doing deliveries and they're doing okay, but it's not the same. So if they can really get through this next period of time, I think it'll be okay, but it'll be back to normal in a couple of years as we used to see normal.
I hope so. So lastly, Norm, I know Italy has been a sweet spot for you and Debbie. You guys vacation there often. You spend time in Positano. How how is it as a black man when you go abroad? I mean, you obviously as a celebrity, Debbie is a celebrity. There's a certain, advance that you guys have, in terms of people in some cases recognizing you, but maybe not everywhere. But is there any piece of wisdom that you want to drop on us about how to move around the globe as a black man and how you do that so successfully and so well?
Well, hey, these are different times. I mean, I don't travel back there like I used to. I mean, the first time I started traveling to Europe with Debbie, in the 80s, early 80s or something, I used to give her all the luggage and let her go through customs in the countries. Then I'll come in with no bag because I got tired of them stopping me, going through all of my stuff. So I used to just walk up. I let Debbie go through. They help her through. She gets out in the car. Then I walk up there with one bag and my passport and go, I don't have nothing. Because I got tired of them opening every one of my bags. So that was one of the early experiences. Move forward a little bit. Debbie and I started traveling, I think, for a summer award show. Fame was probably one of the biggest shows in the world. It was a big international hit. So when you go to Italy and France and Sweden, Fame was the number one show in those countries, one of the top shows. So they recognized her. Then eventually I went and played in Italy. So after I played in Italy and, with Debbie, so when we moved around Italy, it was pretty comfortable and we made good friends in Italy. So we went back there a lot. I'll tell you the piece of advice. You said a piece of advice. My mother-in-law told me this. Always read about a place before you travel to it. Go grab your book, read about it, understand a little bit about the history, the culture, the museums, the art. So when you land, you already know a little bit about the place. Some places you might want to see, you might not want to see, in addition to the restaurant. So I say as you move around, and I would always put a tape in my car just so wherever I landed, I could at least say, good morning, how are you? How do I get here? And then people will be a little more apt to help you. If you try to say some things, they might laugh at you, like, okay, but they'll tell you. But when you go there and think everybody's supposed to speak English. So I say, if you go into a place, put your tape in your car for like a week so you can at least go in there and say, hey, good morning, how are you? Good morning, nice to see you, if you can. And that in itself will probably make your trip a lot better.
Well, what I think, in summarizing here, Norm, I think one of the things that I always admired about you was your humility and, you just kind of laid it out that, you go to a place, even with your eyes open and you take the time to kind of learn a little bit about a place before you go. It wouldn't surprise anyone to know that you were the class president of your senior class in high school. That you finished 17th out of 700 graduating seniors. But, I say all that, Norm, just to say that, you've been extremely influential in my life, man, and very, very generous, both you and Debbie, towards me over the years. And you really helped to establish me on my path, as a restaurateur and entrepreneur. And I just really want to say thank you, man. I really appreciate it. You've been very significant to me.
I mean, do like I told Lou, don't cry, Lou, when I tell you this. I ain't gonna cry, Brad, but I'm humble. Thank you, man. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Norm, for your time with us today. So we're going to turn to our segment called How We Move Around the World and Back with Ambassador Shabazz.
Hello.
Ambassador, what's happening?
I'm here in Bluegrass City. They call it
Bluegrass City. Louisville.
Oh, no L. No L.
Did I get it right? Louisville.
Louisville.
All right.
Okay.
Well, welcome, and so glad that you're going to be able to join me each week. Why don't you give us a little flavor as to what you're going to inform us about, the kind of things that we can look forward to in upcoming shows, and enlighten us a little bit. We're really happy that you're joining us here.
A lot of the times we would talk over the years about paradigm shifts. What's next, what's new, who's the customer. And here we are again, but differently. The whole world is in a paradigm shift. So not only can you not go out to a restaurant, people have their rhythms are thrown off. And so we want to talk about how to reboot, how to redefine life, forge new alliances and signatures, and not just to generate a dollar, but to hold on to that passion and to fellowship. And so, me, I've lived on the road. I grew up on the road. In my own house, we had food that we were kosher. So we had to select certain foods. We didn't have white sugars. We didn't have white bread. Cornbread was different. My soul food was variable. It came from the different parts of my own personal cultures that people don't generally know about. The visitors that my father and mother would have over became our cuisine. The remedies for wellness were not at a pharmacy. So it was interesting during this whole time, this whole year, if only in March we knew it would have been 9-10 months, we could have prepared differently. But at the time, in the anxiety, it was, how do we find ourselves? How do we fellowship? I think that's what most people missed. And so on this show, Around the World and Back is intentional, is discussing tourism, health and wellness, cultural traditions. For me, that's important. The United Nations has 193 member countries, but we always talk about the world being over there somewhere. Right here around us are foods and experiences over your left and right shoulder. So we don't need a passport. We don't need to get on a plane right now. I find myself, while I'm here in Louisville, Kentucky, beyond the sweet tea and the hot brown, going to some of the international restaurants for takeout, whether it's a Gambian restaurant for a family to make sure that they stay open, or a Middle Eastern one so that I can get great hummus or tagine. I crave those flavors and the savory and the stories and the preparations of food, and also enabling people to know that they're not going to be stranded, that their passion or their dream business, which is usually a family history, right? It's not out of the blue that they're sharing these things. And so you get to have the narratives and everything. So being able to share that with you week to week is exciting. I have to say that in preparation for this, I must have had 40 conversations in the last couple of weeks, because my nature is one that when I start a conversation, there are 3 different arteries there, and you're learning about someone in the restaurant business or the culinary or the hotel, and you start to realize that everybody's rebooting. And so we start now rubricing how we're going to make new things happen. And it's been absolutely exciting. And I think through the corner table in this process, we're going to realize and affirm for some people who think their idea might be a little outlandish. And you get to say, no, we heard it on the corner table, or we heard how we move, talk about it, and perhaps maybe enable people to feel a little bit more confidence about how they proceed. So it's not just how I move or how you move, but how do we move together, right? And the ecosystem of Congress, of how we come together. I mean, the pandemic affects everybody around the world. Global warming is affecting everybody around the world. Even civil unrest is affecting everybody around the world. So we can't have a them and us attitude. We have to really work with that we, and right around you is an answer. There's a signature.
Well, yeah, in listening to you lay that out, I'm so excited because I know and have spent a lot of time with you. We've traveled together. We've taken some really amazing trips. Belize comes to mind, and some of the phenomenal places that you took us to in Belize, from Mayan chocolate to Garifuna, and the lovely stays that we would have at Black Orchid with Doug Thompson, and some of the talks that we would have there. But I'm really happy to share you with our listening audience, because I know you've been, a little bit, we'll say, undercover. You don't necessarily broadcast your presence. No. But one of the things I've always admired about you, Ambassador, is the way that people respond to you because of how you respond to them. And I'm hoping that in the segment, some of that quality that you have in your ability to relate to people and have them relate back to you, from the ticket counter at American Airlines to the gentleman who owns the Mayan chocolate little village in Belize. I see how people respond to you. So I'm not surprised that 40 people have responded to you since you first brought up the idea of your participation here. But really, really, really excited to have you.
Well, thanks for saying that. It enables me to share it as well. Usually I'm taking people on the road with me. So we curate these delegations, like cultural immersions, for about 9 days. But of course, that has been at a halt. And the questions are, how do we do that virtually? who are we talking to? With whom are we sharing? And how do we proceed? So for instance, I spoke to a senator from Senegal last week, whom I've known for about a year, and he's now manages the tourism for the government. And the conversation that he shared was that there's no more international tourism, but they're now identifying assets within their country and sharing it with their citizens. Same thing with the new chairman of the Grenada Tourism Board, is that the Caribbean is its own bubble.
Spice Island.
The Spice Island. And that's where my grandmother's from. So, but then he also said to me that we're learning how to do the bubble. How do we engage people from the nation, from our region, to be a part of what we generally save for the outside tourists? So a lot is happening now, right? In those synergies. And what's the conversation? So I always asked them, what do you need? What's next? What would move the pendulum? How can we all be a part of that? And it's exciting for me, as you can, tell, I'm talking fast. And then it's the arteries. You have food with a mission. And we've now heard or seen the announcement of Colin Kaepernick's new ice cream with Ben & Jerry's. And he's vegan, and it's a non-dairy ice cream called Change the World, WHIRLED, and it's in support of his Know Your Rights camp, which has a mission. It's 100%. You have Lisa Dyson, who has something. She's a food scientist, and it's a meatless meat, and it's called air protein. And I'm still trying to understand the science of it, but it's almost like air-based agriculture. And I don't know enough about the molecules and the elements, but that's what they're bringing to the fore, which means then you'll have a bounty of food in terms of food justice or the parities. But I started to ask her about what does that mean in terms of fine dining, so that there's a business component as well as a social impact one. What does that mean? How do you prepare that? Or Isaiah Thomas, who most people know as an athlete, but he has the proprietary rights and is the owner of a long generational vineyard and champagne company out of France called Cherlin French champagne, and it's low sugar. He's made it or got the ingredients to a place where it's digestible and it's helpful for the system and not disruptive for the system. So you have different things like that. There are young sisters in Tennessee is where they are, Memphis, Tennessee. They were doing city tasting tours. Well, we can't do that anymore. So they now do these city tasting boxes where it's now deliverable, packageable, no different than any kind of Harry and David or whatever. But they're doing it specifically, as they said, to keep the spirit alive through the pandemic. So what people are figuring out after some months of anguish is how to merge their passion work with purpose. And we want to make sure they also have a revenue stream, so that we have to make sure that we're supporting those industries or businesses along the broad range of hospitality.
Well, it starts, as you know, with bringing some awareness to, all of the cool things that are happening and things that our folks are up to. So with that, I just want to once again say thank you for your willingness to join me on Corner Table Talk. And every week, I'm sure our listeners are really going to look forward to Ambassador Shabazz.
Thank you very much.
Corner Table Talk is hosted by Brad Johnson, produced by Brad and Linda Ailes Johnson, coordinating producer Lauren Turner, theme music Life Goes On by Bryce Vine, executive producers Omar Thompson, Andrew Kalb, and Ken Johnson. Find the Corner Table Talk podcast wherever you get your podcast. Follow, subscribe, rate, and leave a comment. Corner Table Talk is a Say It Loud Network production.